last week, an Indian, like not a major Indian, small Indian beauty company, conducted a stress survey among their employees. So basically, they launched a survey, internal survey, where they asked their employees, basically, guys, how stressed are you? And what can we do to help you with the stress? There was like a survey. There are some screenshots all over the internet. And employees who admitted that they're stressed and who scored high in this survey, they received the email from the company saying that, you know what, we care about you. That's why you're being laid off, in order to de-stress. Of course, the whole survey, emails, everything went viral. I think this company called Yes Madam. Next day, of course, they published that no, nothing happened. We didn't lay off anyone. Like, that was the miscommunication, misinterpretation, and all misses. But this is not the first time with ugly layoffs or layoffs but non-layoffs and so on. My question is, seems like we have many layoffs over the recent 5 years, basically since 2020, since the COVID. And they are all quite weird. They're massive, weird, ugly, many of them. Is it our new reality now? Are we going to live in this world of weird layoffs?
Well, give me some other examples.
Okay, let's go. So, January 2023, Alphabet, Google, they announced the layoff of approximately 12,000 employees, which is 6% of their global workforce. Before 2023, for the recent for the 3 years, they've been hiring massively. One day they announced 12,000, and they do it just like with massive emails. Another one, Tesla, 2024, they announced of, I think it was just, I'm checking, it was 2% of their workforce. The next day, after they announced this layoff, they opened 800 of new vacancies, of new vacant positions. Then another one, Volkswagen. I think we talked about this in the previous episode when we were talking about the Germany. They announced the plan to cut 15,000 jobs, 10% salary cut, and freeze a couple of plants. Again, ugly, and it's very strong sign of the Germany industry. These are just the random numbers. I have more. Actually, there is a whole website called layoffs.fyi where you can see in the real time how many positions and how many people were laid off, primarily in tech companies. But you can see this.
Yep. So the question again.
Let me repeat the question. My question is like this: we have many layoffs. Many of them are ugly in the way they are handled or presented, or at least, if not ugly, but weird. And my question is it our new reality? Is it our new reality with these layoffs happening in the corporate world?
100%. So I firmly believe that these layoff issues are going to continue and persist. It actually goes back to a few episodes that we've done. One was on the global economy where, again, as you remember, I was very pessimistic about the outlook for the global economy. A lot of it has to do with geopolitics and politics. So if you look at Europe, for example, I really want to hone in on the Volkswagen issue. Before I get to that, though, I'll talk about a little bit around Alphabet, around Meta. I know who fired a bunch of people, a lot of these U.S. tech companies. So when we think about what happened in U.S. tech post-COVID, there was a huge explosion in tech usage, tech demand. We all started working from home, so we all needed new tech products, tech services, everything around that. They dropped interest rates to zero. They pumped money full of the economy. So who did the best in that period of time? It was tech companies. So again, whether it was the stock market, whether it was company performance, these companies were doing phenomenal. So now that we've entered into this new era, this higher inflation era, this geopolitically sensitive era, this higher interest rates and everything else, those tech companies, those massive hiring binges that they did, we're now seeing a lot of that obviously was done in excess. And once the cycle corrected, which was higher interest rates, more expensive to borrow money, more expensive to hire more people, naturally there was going to be some sort of reversal to the mean. So I think because tech companies saw that biggest artificial boom well, it was a real boom. It wasn't artificial, but that massive boom during COVID. Then you had interest rates drop to zero. These tech companies were flush with cash. They brought on way too many people. And again, CEOs, I think like Mark Zuckerberg and others have said, we overdid it during the pandemic, and now we obviously are needing to tamp it down. So these big tech companies, I think absolutely these layoffs are going to continue. Again, companies like Tesla, I would imagine, whatever, these large corporate companies looking to cut costs, higher interest rates, a more complicated economic time, naturally we're going to see this. Then you've got some layoffs that are a bigger story than just the Teslas or just the Alphabets. So that's an economic question. That's like a cycle question. What you have with Volkswagen, which is more concerning, is a greater German issue. And this has to do with the dynamics in Germany itself, which I don't think are going anywhere, and I think are going to get worse. So what we saw is that Volkswagen, I think, had its biggest layoffs in 87 years, if I read that correctly.
In 87 years.
87 years.
87 years.
That's before World War II.
Exactly.
That's before, German reunification. So think about what Germany's been through in the last 87 years. And the biggest layoffs in its history are happening now. The reasons for that, I think, are not going to change. So what you're seeing here is slowing sales, greater Chinese competition from the electric car market. So that's obviously going to undercut from a price perspective. Volkswagen is selling 500,000 fewer cars in Europe just versus 2019. So that's obviously a very troubling sign. Plant costs for the physical plant are 50% higher than what Volkswagen was expecting, and twice as expensive as the competition. Biggest reasons for that: the labor costs in Germany, highly unionized labor force, demanding high wages, high benefits, and energy costs. Energy costs have skyrocketed since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So if you look at German households, for example, they are still paying today 75% more when it comes to energy prices than 2021, late 2021. So again, kind of post-pandemic, but pre-Russian invasion of Ukraine. Obviously, factories are impacted by that too. This dynamic isn't going to change. So if you look at, you've got one issue, the business cycle, higher inflation, higher interest rates naturally is going to negatively impact hiring and growth and all these other things. But then you have these geopolitical dynamics. That's not going anywhere. I don't think Germany is going to suddenly start re-importing Russian gas tomorrow, even if there's a peace deal. So I think these problems are systemic, not going anywhere, and likely to get worse. So I think the layoffs, to answer your question, yes, they're going to continue. Hopefully they're not as weird as some of these examples like the one in India and whatnot, but I think we should brace ourselves for that. We should expect it. And in some of these geopolitically sensitive areas, I think it's going to be exponentially worse. But that's my take. What's your view?
I partly agree in a way that yes, they will continue. But I disagree with my own question in the way that there is nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. The mass layoffs, it's not a new it's not a new thing. It's not a new event. We have always seen it. Every time in the times of economic decline, or in the signs of economic decline, or in the particular cases with some particular companies, we could see the mass layoffs, because anyway the people costs are always one of the largest costs.
It is the biggest. Yeah.
One of the depends on the structure of the business. But what I wanted to say also is why we see these layoffs as like so weird and ugly, because there is no more such thing as an internal communication. Everything that happens in the company goes public immediately. Everything gets viral. So every time I think 10 years ago, if something like that could happen, nobody would have heard about it, because it would stay internally in the company. Even though the same weird things might have happened, like let's do the stress test and then fire you. But now it gets viral, and it can, especially with the remote work, where suddenly the layoffs became, they started to make them on the video calls, on the Zoom calls, and it's very easy to record. The moment you are laid off, you recorded this, you publish this. Okay, here you go. We have the viral video. Everybody knows that, Elon Musk say okay, I don't like how you look today, so you're fired, and so on and so on. So there's no such thing as an internal communication anymore. That's why we hear about these layoffs, and it's both. It's a good thing and a bad thing, because it's a bad thing in a way that it creates more stress, and people get more stressed. Okay, everybody's experiencing layoffs, so probably my company's next, even though there are no signs for that. But it's a good thing again because the employees have more ways to protect themselves. Like, don't do it ugly. Don't do it ugly. That's the message to the managers. I would say, don't do it ugly. Do it gracefully. Even though layoff is like one of the hardest management decisions that one can take. Then, regarding your point on the geopolitical topics, yeah, of course, the economic tense driven by the geopolitical issues. Again, it's nothing new and it's not going anywhere. With that, I totally agree with you. And I also think that in particular in the Volkswagen case, there is even more, because I think like 5 years ago, they also paid a huge fine for the environmental fraud. Huge fine. I think we will need to check this and we will show it over here, but I think it was in €1 billion, in billions of euros. So this was a huge fine. And then again, automotive industry, I think in 2008 and in 2020, these two industries, they suffered the most, because during pandemic, Volkswagen plants, they were they were stopped. Nothing was produced, and there was a huge break. It was a huge break in supply chain and everything. So they suffered even more, not only in the geopolitical issues, but in, I don't know, what can we say? Pandemic, is it a geopolitical issue or is it a social issue?
Yeah, social. I would
So
say.
whatever,
Yeah.
all these outside issues. So in Volkswagen case, like, yeah, like all the stars, they like connected in the same very unlucky point for the company, and I really hope that they will survive.
But nothing was worse in 87 years.
Nothing was
So
worse.
that's-
Nothing was worse. Yeah. This is like unprecedented thing. Yeah.
I think it's a sign of wider European and German decline on account of geopolitics and demographics, and this is a much maybe wider conversation.
So
to
you
have.
think also this is also one of the puzzle pieces to our European integration?
It can be, of course, and then you have
discussion.
Chinese competition and all these other things, new entries into the markets. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's again, you got the economic problem, which is natural, and you're going to see that. But I think some instances like Volkswagen and what's happening in Germany can be worse. So let's see. Let's hope for the best and hope it's not a major trend.